What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Federico Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, here we are, right at the end of August. It's hard to believe it's almost September here in the United States. It's starting to get a bit more chilly. Well, maybe not where Ralph is in Texas, but it's almost springtime over there in Paraguay, and obviously it's been a crazy couple of weeks. Paraguay's had a new president. We've had also a lot of football happening, a big football game happening in Rio de Janeiro yesterday with Olimpia taking on Fluminense. We'll talk about how they fared out and what are the odds of them making a improbable comeback next week in Asunción. We'll also talk about what's been going on in the Clausura, where we stand right now, if it's really going to go down the wire or if one team is going to indeed run away with it very early on. And of course, unfortunately, we do have to talk about bad news about a certain player who got injured a couple of days ago and how big of a loss that will be, not just for his team, but also for Paraguay heading into the World Cup qualifiers, which in exactly 13 days will kick off in Ciudad del Este against Peru. So let's go into that. Let's go to the man whose beard looks so great each and every week I'm seeing it. Fede Perez, man, how are you?
I'm doing good, Roberto. Nice to see you. Nice to see you, Ralph. Great to be back again for another episode. We got so much football to run back. We got so much going forward. Also, this weekend, we got a huge game in the league, in the local league, between Cerro Porteño and Libertad. That's actually been probably the showdown of the year, right? Every time they face each other, it's been kind of like the big game because Olimpia has never been really on the league. Guarani has never been trying to get the title either. So pretty much the apertura, the clausura has been between these two teams. Obviously, the Olimpia fans are only talking about Libertadores. They were very anxious about this game that just happened in Rio de Janeiro. You guys can imagine how the atmosphere was here in Paraguay waiting for this match. And now we have a whole week to wait for that second leg. And after this 2-0, I don't know how you guys are feeling, but I'm not feeling too good about what I saw from Olimpia. We'll get into depth about this situation, and just such a bad news, such a sad news to hear what happened with Julio Enciso. We gotta talk about the situation because it affects the team, it affects the strategy probably also from our coach, because I think he was probably going to start against Peru. That he's had that starting role lately in the Paraguayan team, and you saw him with those assists in that first Premier League game, and you were just so happy for him. And now this sad news, but we got to talk about all these things and so much more here in Guarani Vision. It's great to be back, Roberto.
It is good to see you again. Let's go on some good news, actually, because while we are keeping on the stateside as Ralph and I are in, I guess we can talk about, all of the mania of Inter Miami. They just won their first title, winning the Leagues Cup. They're now in a final for the U.S. Open Cup, which is the equivalent to the Copa Paraguay, FA Cup, that kind of thing. And the debut in MLS happening tomorrow. I'll be glad to be there, taking on New York Red Bull, which will include Carlos Coronel, the goalkeeper, the new naturalized goalkeeper, who's expected to get a call up this weekend. In the next few days, even today, as the time of recording, to be the starting goalkeeper for Paraguay. Obviously, naturalized Brazilian, thanks to his mother. But the news is that Diego Gomez winning a title. He was able to play a strong part and help score in the penalty shootout, actually, to help Inter Miami win their first ever title against Nashville in the Leagues Cup. So at least, in all this kind of negativity that we've been seeing in bad results, at least we're seeing one good story coming out of the United States with Diego Gomez being the first Paraguayan since Jesus Medina to win a title in the United States for an MLS team.
Yeah, that's right. Hi, guys. It's good to be back. And talking about Paraguayans in the US, it was a really good interview you guys did with Sebastian Chavez, the captain of the US under 15s, but he has Paraguayan heritage, so that's pretty cool. Diego Gomez, he's getting a bit of criticism actually locally because I think he was played as a much more defensive player in that last game, and that's not really his natural role. So I think maybe people were a bit confused as to why he wasn't winning the ball back as much, but that's not really his role. It's just that with Dixon Arroyo out and Miami with such an attacking lineup, somebody has to do the dirty work, and it kind of fell on Diego a little bit in that semi-final. but it is great that he's picked up another title. Remember, he's only 20 years old. He's already won, I would say, 4 major titles if we want to include the gold medal at the South American Games, which he won with Paraguay, and then he's also won 2 league titles, Libertad, plus his league's cups. I mean, he's getting very used to silverware very young, which is always good. Again, we're talking about the national team, right? I think you want players that are in the national team with a winning mentality who know what it is to try and win things, because otherwise, how do you start to build that within the national team if you don't have those kind of players? So yeah, good. It's good for him, but I'm just hoping he gets maybe a bit of a role more as a number 8, which is where he naturally plays, and not so much as trying to be a ball winner in midfield, which isn't really his game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important for him to get that experience, and obviously, maybe he hasn't been to the best of the extent that maybe Paraguayans are hoping for, but I think it's kind of a learning process. Remember, this is a side that technically is still the worst team in MLS. I mean, at the time, yeah, they're probably going to win true trophies at the end of the year, but the fact that they've had an incredible turnaround in the last few weeks, I would say it's been incredible to see. So we'll have to see what happens, and I'm looking forward to seeing him and Carlos Coronel, and of course Messi. Why wouldn't anyone want to see him tomorrow, which is kind of in the hottest ticket in New York City at the moment. So let's switch gears to what's been going on in Libertadores, because obviously we had a big game featuring the Paraguayan team Olimpia taking on Fluminense in the Estadio Maracanã, returning to the Maracanã like they did a couple of weeks ago when they took on Flamengo, who lost 1-0 in the first leg. And I would say it was a really tight game. Olimpia started, very early on, obviously resisting a bit of Fluminense, who were, under Fernando Diniz has been, very much an attacking side. And you could even see that in the stats overall, 18 shots compared to 4. But Olimpia gave a fight. They were able to go in and get, some chances. But ultimately, I think it was really a result that I think Fluminense demonstrated why they're one of the best in South America. Yes, they haven't won anything in a while, but the way that they play, the players that they have, I was very much impressed by Andre, the center defensive midfielder who has been rumored to go to Liverpool out of various clubs in Europe. He's the one that scored the opening goal. And then Herman Cano, the Argentine striker, someone who's always had a fire streak playing at Fluminense recently, gets the second goal. So it's a disappointing performance, I would say, for Olimpia from a neutral standpoint. But now they have to go back to the Defensores del Chaco. They have to go back to Asunción. Remember, this was a game that didn't have Richard Ortiz. He was actually injured in the warm-up, so he had to be replaced. Derlis Gonzalez actually came back for his first game. He played the last 10 minutes. So I'm curious to see what Chiqui Arce will do next week over there in Asunción. But Fede, I mean, you said you don't feel that too optimistic. And honestly, I feel the same as well. But is there any sort of hope, especially after what we saw from Olimpia and even just the way that they've kind of performed in games beforehand, to say that maybe it could be done? I personally don't think so. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you view this game.
Well, I'm not as optimistic as I was against Flamengo because, in that first game, we also saw a big difference between one team and the other, especially with Olimpia and the way they wanted to play the match, just defending most of the time and trying to play on the counterattack. And they got a couple of opportunities against Flamengo, but especially it was the result. It was just a 1-0, and they weren't able to score as much. And in this Fluminense game, I mean, Olimpia just barely had any opportunity. They could barely have the ball even, and it did not look good for Olimpia at all. And Fluminense, in certain moments, I think was ready to stomp on Olimpia. They were really close to a third goal, I believe. Olimpia did not do much. Maybe in those last 10, 15 minutes, they tried to attack a bit more with a couple of more attacking players, especially with Derlis Gonzalez coming in. They kind of needed that leader with what you said, with Richard Ortiz coming out of the team and having to kind of improvise. Yeah, he's been using Junior Barreto lately also as a defender there in midfielder, but he's a center back, so he was installed there between Mateo Gamarra and Romagna to kind of help out there with Herman Cano, and he actually did a really good job, but they lost that center midfielder, right? That leader, that special player that puts those long balls and that can kind of lead the way also. I believe Richard Ortiz is just unreplaceable, and he was playing really well. I mean, people were talking here again about why not taking this Richard Ortiz back to the national team, because he was also playing that well in Libertadores every time the team needed him. And I think against Flamengo in the second game, he was probably one of the best players that I saw in that Defensores del Chaco match. He's the second game is going to be totally different, Roberto. I think Chiquias said it after the game in the press conference. We're going to have to play harder. We're going to have to go and attack this team. Yeah, they're going to have spaces. They're probably going to score a couple of goals again, and you're going to have to really press against this team. I see this team that's a lot better than Flamengo, to be honest. This team defends better. This team in midfield knows how to take care of the ball, and they got Germán Cano. They got John Arias. You mentioned there also this player that's going to Liverpool. They got everything. They got a huge budget difference between Olimpia and Fluminense. This is actually what a lot of people are waiting for. In Brazil, people were saying yesterday, Flamengo should have been here. We wanted to see Flamengo, Fluminense, and not this team against our Brazilian team. And Olimpia has to show what they're really made out of here in Paraguay. I mean, they're going to have a huge game, the perfect game that they couldn't have in Brazil, Ralph. And that's the thing that happened with Olimpia. They made a couple of mistakes. I think in that first half, they were actually doing a pretty good job. It was almost over in that first half, right before Andres shoots from outside the box, and that ball deflects on Mateo Gamarra. They got lucky also. You got to say it, right? I mean, if you were going to that locker room 0-0, you were going to feel good about yourself. But, they even got that on their side.
Yeah, I was going to say the first goal is a stroke of luck because at that point, Olimpia are doing what they were planning to do, which is try and force Fluminense to shoot from outside the box, not let Cano touch the ball inside the box because he's so dangerous. Remember that Cano scored twice against them the last time they played in the home leg. So they know the danger the Argentinian can offer. But I agree with the point about Richard Ortiz. That was, of course, a huge loss because it came in the warm-up. So the whole week they've been preparing for the game with him. It's not like there wasn't much time to react. Although I was surprised that maybe Marcos Gomez didn't take the place of Ortiz directly. Probably, if I was Chiqui Arce, I think I would have done that. They're a bit more like-for-like players. In the end, Gomez comes on as a sub in the second half. But, I mean, I think Olimpia set up every way the way you expected them to. They were not going to have possession. They were going to try and defend and counter. It worked for them against Flamengo, so it made sense in a way they would try it here. But it's a very dangerous tactic when, of course, you have 0 shots on target, which is what they had. They managed some shots, but none on target. And then because they're now 2 goals down, it's just a much bigger mountain to climb than the one against Flamengo. That said, I think the whole kind of Olimpia fan base still believes because they have overturned a 2-goal deficit against Fluminense before. Last time they were helped by the fact they'd scored 1 in Rio. They lost 3-1 and then they took it back to win 2-0. But here, I think they would still feel they'll be able to score, especially if Derlis Gonzalez is able to start the game. I think that would be a huge kind of, what's the word, like a boost, a morale boost for them if he's able to start, because they know that Derlis, he's kind of capable of breaking things and breaking lines and making a difference when maybe the system itself isn't always working. Like he has that individual quality. So I think that will be a big kind of boost if they can get him. They're going to have the crowd. If they score early, anything could happen. The reality is, and I thought this against Flamengo, I didn't think they'd be able to do it. They surprised me against Flamengo, and that was only 1-0. Now it's 2 goals. It's obviously a much bigger task, but it's definitely going to be a totally different game. We're not going to see the same tactics from Chiqui Arce. And for someone like Denise, the coach of Fluminense, he doesn't like the game when they're on the back foot. I mean, he likes the game like last night, that he has all the possession and he gets to build up. So let's see what happens when Olimpia maybe come in with that different tactic and how they react to it being the away side. So I think it's still going to be a fun second leg to watch for sure.
Well, remember, Ralph, as well, the Flamengo took the lead early on in the second leg as well. It was like 8 minutes, but then it was a quick response. So it has to be something similar to that. And again, it's essentially the same. Okay, yeah, take out 8 minutes, but it's still the same situation that they were a couple of weeks ago. But I mean, it really is tough. I mean, Flamengo is not Fluminense. I think Sampaoli's tactics are a bit more different than Diniz. I think he's obviously more pragmatic, and like you said, if he is going to be someone that has to go and defend, where Chiquiar said they're going to go in and try to obviously score Fede, I think that's going to change a whole different perspective. But I'm looking at some of the players that didn't show up, like your Walter Gonzalez, is your I thought Tito Torres as well had a really bad game. Espinola, for as much as you can see the 2 goals, I think he did well, getting into some of those opportunities, and even from some of the defenses, because they had some good clearances as well. But it, again, like you said, they're gonna have to have the perfect game next week in Asunción if they're gonna reverse this tie.
Yeah, and Chiqui Arce has a lot of players to decide now, right? Because just as Ralph was mentioning, he has Dennis Gonzalez back. He's obviously important in the offense. If he's healthy, if he plays against Luqueño, which is the next game Olimpia has in the local league, maybe he has a good game there, or at least or has good minutes, and then he can start against Fluminense with who, right? With Paiva, maybe with Walter Gonzalez again, maybe Bruera. Bruera did not come in this game; he was sitting on the bench. That was maybe a player that can help out. I mean, Olympia's going to look for it, and Olympia's going to need those tall players. Let's not forget that against Flamengo, it was those long balls, it was those headers. That's the way that Olimpia made the difference. You're not expecting this team to have that much football in the midfield. You're not expecting this team to have the possession. This is what Olimpia has been during the Libertadores, especially against the big Brazilian teams. They knew how to do it. They got the formula to do it against Flamengo. That's why people are expecting to get it done against Fluminense. That's why everything is sold out, Roberto. Before this match was even played, Olimpia fans were believing before the match was played in Rio de Janeiro. They did not care what the result was. They're believing in this team. The journey has just been so special, especially after taking out the last champion. And I want to see what Chiqui Arce does, because if he does not have Richard Ortiz back in that midfield, he's going to have to change it up. He tried it with a totally different new midfield in this game. There are players that are coming back. I mean, I think Tucu Salazar, even Sergio Talbot could have an opportunity as the right back, and maybe put Alex Silva in midfield to try to create a little bit more football, to try to create a little bit more of opportunity, because Olimpia is going to have to put everything on Fluminense. They're going to have to score now, Ralph. If not, it's going to be all Brazilians. I mean, Inter did it in La Paz. I mean, Palmeiras just blew away against the Colombian team, Pereira. I mean, it looks like it's just going to be for them. If not, I mean, just give it to them already.
Yeah, somebody's gonna fly the flag for one of the smaller countries outside of Brazil and Argentina, and so that could be Olimpia. And yeah, I mean, I think it'll just be it's a good thing you mentioned Bruera as well. Yeah, it was strange to see Paiva come in as the first sub, but Paiva's a player that that he can cause problems with long balls. So maybe, and he's played in Brazil before, so maybe Chiqui Arce saw it that way of using him last night. But yeah, you just look at this and you think all those goals against Flamengo were headers as well. So maybe it is about starting with 2 strikers, so Dennis Gonzalez and one other, and really taking it early on, trying to kind of bombard Fluminense and see what they can get from that kind of angle, because that obviously did work against Flamengo. I mean, from now, it is, even though they have the Luqueño game coming up, I just don't know if that's going to be such a big deal. It's I could imagine everything now is focused on getting it right for this game in the Defensores del Chaco, which, like Fede says, is going to be sold out again. It's going to be a great atmosphere. It's starting to get warm again in Paraguay because it's springtime. People are gonna be so excited about this. Maybe they'll do the mosaic again. They did the really cool mosaic in the last match, which just adds, I think, a bit of emotion before the game even starts. So despite the result being 2-0, I just think it's still going to be a great atmosphere, a great kind of feeling. There's something different about the night of a Copa Libertadores game compared to just your regular league games, right? And so that lifts everybody. There's the prize money on the line. Yes, there's the fact you finally get to be maybe the only representative outside of Brazil and Argentina. Well, it would look to be very likely, which is a huge thing. So it's still going to be just a massive game, and maybe Olimpia can do it, because remember what Olimpia have been doing so far, and even going back, I think, to last year when the team wasn't very good either, is that they were winning these games not kind of by being tactically or individually better than the other teams. It was just finding something extra. It was almost like a mental or emotional, or we're talking about like kind of, mystica, which I don't know what the best way to explain it, but it's a mystery.
Mystique as well.
Yeah. So it was just using some of that to get through games, and hey, that might be what happens again, because on paper you wouldn't expect them to win, but there's all of this kind of building into the energy of the game, which is, it's going to be a great match, I think.
So I guess we'll go into that and we'll go on the record, and I'll go to Fede as well. Just a simple yes or no. Do Olimpia achieve the miracle and qualify to the semifinals?
Oh, I think they pulled out a miracle already. I
And
think
lightning strike twice.
I think they could do it again. I don't know why I see penalties on the way, and I think this is going to be one of those dramatic nights of Libertadores, and in penalties anything can happen. I think Fluminense has a much better team. They deserve to go on through. If I got to be honest, after what I saw in this first game, but yeah, I'm going to stick with Fluminense after what I saw from this first game. So penalties, Fluminense.
Ralph?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to put money on it, I'd still put my money on Fluminense. I mean, the Olimpia, everything we've just talked about, it's like that's the little part of hope or miracle that could happen. But I think if you have to say who you think is going to go through, for me, it's still Fluminense. But I'm hoping Olimpia push them to the very last.
Yeah, I think Olimpia will have to definitely, like I said, play the perfect game, and they're going to have to go in like quickly, score very early, to give them some hope. Because once you get that one goal, you could be motivated to score another. And I think, we even saw that against Flamengo. But that being said, I think I'm going to agree with both of you guys. And I'm sure, sorry, Maria, if you're hearing this, like, I don't want our team to get eliminated, but I think that's how we all personally feel. I think Fluminense get it done. I think Olimpia win the game, actually. They win 1-0, but it won't be enough because of that second goal. So I think, unfortunately, Olimpia's dream in the Libertadores, that kind of mystique, and after beating the defending champions, I think their dream ends next Thursday in the Defensor Jal. But we'll see.
If Olimpia leaves now the Libertadores, we're not going to see Olimpia for a while in the Libertadores, guys, because as of right now, Olimpia is not getting in the Libertadores next year.
That's correct. They're not currently in the position to do so because of the position that they're currently in. Right now, 11th place, almost bottom actually in the Clausura. And then if you add in the Aperturas, I'll have to double check to see, but they're in the Sudamericana stages, which that's not enough to put in. But let's go into obviously what's been going on in the Clausura. We did see obviously Olimpia play against Cerro Porteño in the Super Clásico. Cerro Porteño, in fact, both of them getting draws in the last two games. Olimpia getting the draw against Cerro in the Super Clásico. Cerro getting the draw against Luqueño last Sunday, and Olimpia drawing Guaireña. So that means, but we did see Libertad lose to Trinidense as well. We're seeing, them dropping points. So we have a huge game happening on Saturday. Cerro Porteño against Libertad. Libertad top of the table as we stand with 16 points. Cerro Porteño in second with 14, meaning that a win for either of these sides would change the entire landscape. A Cerro win would be huge for them to push themselves into the race once again, and especially getting a little bit of pressure off Diego Gavilan, who's gotten a lot of pressure as of recently for replacing the Sax Facundo Sava. So I think there's going to be a lot going on with this, Ralph, and I'll go to you on this one. How do you see this? And is this the title? Is this the title decider? Is this the one that decides? That we're probably going to have a race if Libertad wins it. If Cerro Porteño wins it, or if Libertad does, I think we could say that the league is over.
Yeah, I mean, I remember sitting here for the Apertura and thinking we were in a similar situation, and I thought, well, Cerro are playing very well on the Saba. They got a great chance against Libertad, and then Oscar Cardoso showed up, scores 4 goals, and they win 5-0. But that game was very atypical in terms of these recent meetings, because I think Cerro and Libertad, for as much as Olimpia have won titles, Cerro and Libertad have been the best two teams in terms of quality for at least the last, I would say, 3 years since the pandemic, basically, since those seasons. They've consistently had the best quality. Cerro, in their case, haven't always turned that into silverware, but they still have a very good team. So these matchups have usually been very close. Apart from that 5-0, the other 4 games in the last 5, none of them have seen over 2.5 goals, because they've often been like 0-0s or 1-0s. They've been really close games. Cerro won the last meeting 2-0, but if you remember, Libertad had 2 players sent off in that game. But so that winning by a 2-goal margin is actually quite strange as well. So these games are usually very close, very tight. It's 2 good teams. This is interesting because it's for Cerro. They're still unbeaten under Gavilan, but they have drawn their last 2 games, having previously won all the games, right? So they've drawn these last 2 games. The Super Clásico is the Super Clásico, but the Luqueño one was a I think disappointing, because they knew they went into that game the day after Libertad had lost to Trinidense, so they knew they had a good chance to try and make up some ground ahead of this match. Now, with the way it's standing, there is a bit more pressure on Cerro, right? I think they're 2 points behind Libertad, so really, as a draw, still keeps them those 2 points behind. So there's maybe a bit more pressure to go out and try and find the win. I think just on pure quality, Libertad are the better team, and they could win this match. But what we've seen with Cerro, if they can fix their defense, they obviously had to play an 18-year-old in central defense in the last game because of the suspension to Morel. But if they can fix that defense and try and frustrate Libertad a bit early on and not fall 4 goals down with it by halftime, then I think we got a good game on our hands, and it's going to be quite close.
Yeah, I think Cerro Porteño is going to need the best of Cecilio Dominguez probably, right, in this game, who hasn't showed up really in the last 2 games ever since coming back after missing a couple. And Diego Gavilan, Cerro Porteño, they're going to have the pressure on this game. So I want to see just how Libertad throws that on them, because they're going to play at home. Cerro Porteño and Diego Gavilan has not convinced anybody, even though, yeah, they drew the last 2 games, but it felt like they lost points because Libertad drew and then Libertad lost. So they had the opportunity to catch up to Libertad right before facing them. And now you're the team that has to win this game to catch up to Libertad. So Cerro's going to feel that pressure, and Libertad has those players that just feel comfortable in these kind of big games. And for Libertad, you look at the calendar and there's not that much or that many big games still. So I think these are the games that certain players are going to kind of show up. They're going to want to have the stardom, just like Ralph was remembering what happened with Tacuara Cardoso in the Apertura. You could see a Vareiro showing up in a game like this. You could see a Santa Cruz maybe coming on a game like this. Libertad has kind of relaxed, and that's actually been good for the Clausura guys, because if it wasn't for this, we probably would have Libertad with a much bigger difference between them and who they were going to face right now, Cerro Porteño. Cerro looked like they had their defense pretty much settled out with Brock and Morel, but they've been out these last 2 couple of games. It looks like Brock is not coming back, so they've been kind of improvising there. Even Daniel Rivas might start as a center back. That's not his natural position. He's a left back. He's been brought back to the squad, even though he was taken away from the squad like several other players at the beginning of this clausura. So, a lot of things have gone on in that locker room also for Cerro Porteño. It looks like everything is much better for Libertad in the preview. And yeah, if I have to pick a favorite, if I have to pick a team, I would say it's going to be a draw or it's going to be for Libertad. I don't see Cerro Porteño coming out of it, but if they do manage to win it, we have a great tournament on our hands. We have a great race for that title.
I Liga, as people would say over there in Spain, we would have definitely the race there. Yeah, I agree. I think Libertad have been playing tremendously well, and I think Cerro Porteño have just been so inconsistent as of late that you don't know what their best team is, and it could be with Diego Gavilan or even Facundo Sapa or whoever it may be. I look at this side and I see some of the players, and mind you, they've lost a lot of players too, and I just don't see them, clicking on there, which is kind of the bad part. I think with the Libertad side that plays by memory, Garnero has them working well, and I think that's something that could indeed be a huge factor for them. So yeah, I mean, if I have to be a betting man, I would say, this is kind of really non-critical of me, but I'd go for a draw as well. I personally don't think Cerro Porteño have what it takes to win this. As bad as it seems, I think Libertad are a side that are very strong, and they will get at you when necessary. And I think Cerro are just too inconsistent that you don't know what their best version is. So if I was a betting man, I'm sure Ralph, I'm sure you'll get your odds on this one, but I'd bet a draw on this one, 1-1 if I had to pick.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that's just surprised me while I was checking as you guys were talking is it's true that in the league, if you just look at the league matches, Libertad's only scored once in the last 3 games, which is very strange because they lost 1-0. They had the 1-0 win over Resistencia, and they had drawn 0-0 with General Caballero. And that goal, if you think of that one goal in the last 3 games, it was Barbosa. It was a defender. So when you think about that, you think, oh, Melgarejo, Tito Villalba, Oscar Cardoso. Suddenly, oh, you're not firing Enzo Gonzalez, who's now starting to really come into it. Maybe they're not playing as well as we think. But going back to the game, the 5-0 we just talked about, and also the fact, I think you brought it up well, Roberto, that under Garnero, you know how they're going to play, you know how they kind of gel together. It's much easier than what Gavilan's having to do at Cerro. Is he's still trying to like pick the team and build in, and it's like a jigsaw with the pieces that don't quite fit, like Rivas at central defender. So I think, yeah, when it comes to the crunch, like these big games, then Libertad have that big advantage of having those players playing together a long time. It's more likely they would click. Yeah, I think a draw is not a bad bet in that sense, because you think at home as well, Cerro, one player that always does really well at home is Churin. Churin scores goals in La Nueva Olla, whatever seems to happen. So you can imagine something similar to the Clásico, that Cerro might fall behind, but then you have someone like Churin who can rescue them. So I think a draw is not a bad shout at all.
We'll definitely wait and see what happens over there on Saturday, tomorrow as we speak. Unfortunately, we will have to go into some bad news here that we got. As we get to heat up, Guillermo Barcelotto is expected today to announce his squad for the upcoming qualifiers, the first 2 of the 18 qualifiers for the 2026 World Cup, hoping that Paraguay can make it to the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Remember, there's 6.5 spots now and not 4.5. And one name that could indeed not appear in the first 6 games of those 18 is Julio Enciso of Brighton and Hove Albion, who, his manager, Roberto Rojas, just confirmed that he suffered a meniscus injury and is expected to be out for 4 months, which would be in the rest of the year. So this comes at a really bad time, Fede. It comes at a really bad time where I think it's a bad thing first of all, for Brighton, because I think they've been playing so well. He's been kind of an important piece for them, making it to Europa League for the first time. They're off to a good start in the league, 2 wins out of their first 2 games, sitting top of the table. He got his first 2 assists of the season in the last game against Wolves. He got as the number 10 shirt, which I'm sure is a huge responsibility, not just for him, but a lot of Paraguayans who don't typically get that he's the first ever player to wear the number 10 shirt for a Premier League club. So imagine that responsibility at 19. And everything has been going so well for him. And now this injury comes in, a meniscus injury. This changes everything as well for Paraguay, because he certainly was viewed as someone that is kind of the new X factor of a generation trying to make it. We've all been depending on your Almirones, your Romeros, so on and so forth. Here comes Enciso, the new kid on the block, who really is trying to impress and playing his first ever full qualifying process. And now he gets this news, which is a big blow for Guillermo Barcelotto, who's going to have to change his entire team now, which I'm sure everyone was expecting, like you said, Enciso to start this game. But now with him gone, everything kind of just changes for Paraguay for first of all, for these 2 games against Peru and Venezuela.
I'm still not getting over this, guys. It's going to be so hard. I'm going to be there in that game against Peru, and I'm going to be thinking about Julio Enciso. I mean, it's just going to be really hard to get over this situation. We've all been waiting so long for this, right? To see him start this new journey with the team, with his new teammates, finally get together, play some more. We barely saw them together with Miguel Almiron in that friendly game, and you were thinking, no, we need the competition. We need to see them on a big game. We need to see them play more together, and that's what I wanted, right? I wanted that chemistry to get built right away. And with him being out, I'm just getting depressed, guys, because of the team, because of what could happen now with the team. Obviously, yeah, maybe Ramon Sosa comes in the team, another player. It opens opportunities for others, obviously, in the starting role. But as for him, it's just totally bad news. I mean, the season was just starting. The Premier League, he was going to have a very important role in his team, a much more important role than he had last year, which he earned because of how well he played. So I was really happy for him. Just everything that had been working out just perfect for him. And this injury, and it's a sensitive place. Also, it's a knee injury, so you don't know how it's gonna affect the rest of his career. Hopefully, it doesn't. Hopefully, he comes back and he's just the same guy. But we'll see. This is gonna take a couple of months, and we're not gonna have him on the national team. So the national team has to move forward. And obviously, if I was gonna make a list, I was not gonna want. I was never gonna make this list. But if I had to make a list of 3-4 players that I did not want to get injured right before the qualifications, probably Julio was on that top list because I wanted to see him. I wanted to see that player that makes the difference in Brighton, the player that made the difference, probably the best player that came out of Paraguay in these last couple of years. I wanted to see him in these first games against with the national team, but we'll just have to wait, Roberto, and hopefully the team wins. Hopefully the team does not miss him that much. And I hope Brighton does miss him. And when he comes back, he's just as important as he was lately on Brighton.
Not only that, and Ralph, so before you get into it, I think it also comes at a bad time where essentially it's kind of the lightest schedule that you could have. Peru at home, which, aside from that 2-2 draw, Paraguay have always had a good record with them. Venezuela away, always a tough game, but they always have a good record. Bolivia, always, despite not getting the win last time, historically have always gotten a win. Argentina, as good as they've been so far, being Copa America champions and world champions, they always play against each other. There's always a big battle. So imagine losing a player like that for these games, which, I don't like to say easy, but they're ones that Paraguay will have to showcase themselves in their best effort. So it also comes from a timing perspective, probably the worst thing that you could get. And, 6 games of 18, a quarter of the games, that could derail your World Cup. Again, it's a race, not a marathon. You could start off so good, it could happen in the next few games. But I think Paraguay, knowing that especially now with 2 extra spots, it's more of an obligation for them to make it where they cannot fail to not get the results needed. And getting someone like Julio, who was probably going to run at the defenders and, showcase that kind of flair that he's been learning at Brighton, it's a big blow. It's a big blow for Paraguay.
Yeah, it's huge because if you think in all the shows that we do, and we talk through the Paraguay squad and we talk about the players that could be in and out, for a long time we've been talking about a lot of players that are of a similar quality. And now we finally have, we've had Almiron in the Premier League, but if we're honest, he's never really shown up in a Paraguay shirt to be like that difference maker. But now you have essentially one of the best players in Europe, because Brighton's one of the best teams in Europe at the moment. There's no doubt about it. And he's playing on that team as the number 10 and he's playing well. It's like you actually have a difference maker that you can bring into the national team and you can start to see stuff happening. Of course, we didn't know. We can't be sure if he's going to show up and be a difference maker or he's going to be a bit like Almiron and maybe not have the same effect for the national team. But now we don't get to see that in these games that you mentioned, Roberto, that it's the easiest games and it's the 2 home games you have to win. I think there's a lot of deja vu here, but I think we spoke about this when we said when they had drawn those 2 home games, we said no one's ever drawn at home to Bolivia and gone to a World Cup. So you have to win these games, and he's not there. So it's a big blow. It's a worry as well. I mean, the knee injuries with someone that young and he's never really been injured. The only injury he had before was his broken cheekbone, but that's obviously totally different. That's like an impact injury from a player. When you're a very young kid and you're very fast, and then you build up lots of muscle, which is what's happened to Julio, is that can take an effect on your knees. A more famous example is Ronaldo, the original Ronaldo, the Brazilian. His knees never really recovered after he started building himself up a lot with muscle, which is, of course, what they're doing over there. It also, if you remember the game, he wasn't stretchered off, if I remember rightly. He's walking off. So I think we're a bit surprised to hear that it was a tear, given that he walked off. And it did sound, I think, from what I understand, this injury is you could try and play through it without surgery, but sooner or later you're going to need surgery. So what Brighton are doing, which is the right thing for him, is they're doing it now, and it's a longer recovery time, but then there should be less problems in the future. Of course, for Paraguay, that's not great because of all the games coming up. But I think if you look at managing his career and Brighton as a club, they're doing the right thing here by him getting the surgery, as difficult as it is for us to accept as Paraguay fans. But yeah, let's hope that he gets the recovery in. And then in terms of other players, I think Fede mentioned Ramon Sosa. We have to see, do they bring back someone like Morales? And now that he's gone to Toluca and he's playing, because Morales was a player, of course, that missed a lot of games through injury after he had started well with the national team. So we'll have to see where Barros Schelotto goes with that replacement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the main thing as well. I think certainly this is the player for the future. He's 19. He turns 20 in January. By the time he comes back, he'll turn 20. And I think that's someone that I think is very much an impact player. And we'll have to wait and see. And we can only hope. And I think a lot of fans as well, Fed, that they're really torn about this. As much as, he's had 20 games so far at Brighton, not enough, but he's had such a deep impact so early on that people are worried and thinking about replacements, and they're thinking that the team has done so well. It comes at a wrong time for them, and I think you have to feel, as much as we are kind of disappointed and depressed that he's not going to be playing for the national team this year. I think that from a Brighton perspective, how that derails their season, and just as well like everything else that they're going for, Europa League and all the other competitions. I think the one factor, and Ralph can back me up on this, is by the time they come back, there's competitions as well happening in Asia, the Asian Cup, the African Cup of Nations. So you got players from those countries having to go back, and by the time that's going to be in January, February. So by that time, if Enciso recovers well, he'll be back and he'll be the main guy, and everyone will have to look towards him. So the good news is as well, there have been fears of ACLs. That would have been way worse if that had happened. It wasn't, thankfully, as bad as a meniscus injury is. So that's only the silver lining you can get. The only hope that we can hope for, and this is what Guillermo Schelotto can hope from the other players that are at his disposal, is that by the time he comes back, Paraguay are in a position to be to qualify and are still in those spots to go and fight for it. The worst thing would be having a terrible start and being so far off of everyone else that when Julio comes back, everything else was just going to have to depend on him. And I don't think that's something that he wants.
Yeah, I think we're on that path between two scenarios, between when he comes back and everybody waiting for the star to come back and try to rescue the team, or if the team builds up and he's just going to be something that's going to come into a team that's already working. Hopefully it's that second situation, right? Hopefully Paraguay can make the best out of this moment where they're not going to have their start. I mean, that's what people are talking about here, Roberto. Enciso became that shining star for everybody, something to look forward to in this qualifications. We have not had that many players with this story with Diego Gomez, with everything that happened with him recently. I think a lot of people felt a similar situation with Julio Enciso's also journey so fast to Europe, and this is something, obviously people love these kind of stories and they get attached to it. And obviously when you have these kind of players in the national team, they are an attraction. I think a lot of people went to that friendly because Julio Enciso was going to come back to the team. He's going to play with Miguel Almiron. And I don't know if it's going to have an effect on the tickets now being sold in Ciudad del Este. I want to see just how many people we're really going to have in the stands. They're going to take the national team away from Asunción. This is something that we haven't seen yet. And it's not just going to be for one game. It's going to be for all the games in this year, as far as we know now. So it's going to come. It's never a good time to get your star injured, but it's probably better now at the first games than later on in this journey. I'm just hoping that Julio Enciso comes back and he's the best player that we've seen, and he becomes even better, because that's something that I've been really proud of. Ever since he left, he's just been coming better and better as a player. So you don't know just how much this kid can evolve. You don't know how good he's going to get. He can be a top uh, player of the world, even. To be honest, I mean, that's what a lot of people are talking about. There were rumors about Manchester City following this kid, so but we don't even know what we really have in our hands right now.
Yeah, we got he's the Hoya, the jewel, and he is this prospect, right? That we haven't seen in Paraguay. I think really since like Roque maybe. So, and he could even go further than Roque because he's getting all this regular football. But we know what happened to Roque too. He got injured a lot when he got to Europe, and that hampered his career. And when you talk to him, if you ask him about his regrets, it's the injuries which he can't control, but that was the most difficult parts of his career. So you hope that for Julio, this is kind of a one-time thing, and it doesn't become like a series of injuries that starts to hamper his career, because it can happen. I just want to talk about the style of player again. It does happen with these kids that are very quick and fast, and your game's based on a lot of speed as well, because you still need to build up the athleticism, but you're not a natural athlete because he's not. Look at his build when he started. So it can be difficult suddenly and then we haven't spoken about it here, but of course everybody is talking about games becoming longer because now they're playing more stoppage time. There's more games happening. The game load is so much. So it's a lot all of a sudden for somebody that really was playing against, I don't know, like he was playing against General Caballero and Guarani not that long ago. This is really a different world. So let's hope that he comes back, and then this is, like we say, just a one-off injury that can be managed. And then for Paraguay, that we see more Julio Encisos coming through, because I mean you've got Enzo Gonzalez at Libertad right now, who's looking like he could be another similar style of player, and we know that Libertad has done very well in building these players through, because what we don't want is for Julio to be this one-off, right? We want to get more and more players like this and start to build a generation of talent as they come here to the US for 2026, which we're all looking forward to.
Yeah, and obviously all of our prayers and support is given to Julio Enciso, and hopefully that he makes a fast recovery in time to be back in action for Brighton and for Paraguay. For myself, Roberto Rojas, to close us off this episode, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.